Welcome to Her Weekly Fix. I'm Dr. Laura Pipher, Naturopathic Doctor, and every week I'm here to give you a quick, no fluff dose of the latest health insights, science backed tips, and real world solutions to help you feel your best. Whether it's tackling hormonal chaos, digestive struggles, or low energy, we'll break it all down in 10 minutes or less. Let's get into this week's fix. I want to talk about something that might surprise you, especially if you've been watching your carbs, eating high protein snacks, and still wondering why the weight is not budging or why your energy keeps crashing. The truth? Some of the healthiest foods on your plate might be quietly spiking your insulin, even if your blood sugar looks totally normal. Today, we're unpacking the difference between the glycemic index, insulin index, and why this little known concept might be the missing link in your metabolism, especially if you're over the age of 35, noticing more stubborn belly fat, carb cravings, or hormonal resistance. So, you've probably heard of the glycemic index. It tells us how quickly a food raises your blood sugar. But here's the thing: blood sugar and insulin don't always rise together. So let's start by understanding what glucose and insulin actually do. I like to think of insulin rather, as a key holder. The glucose is the actual breakdown of the food we eat, and the insulin is the key holder that opens up the cell and lets the glucose in that cell so the cell can use it for energy. When I explain this to my patients, I say that the glucose is the thing and the insulin is the hormonal response to that thing. Now, often when we're looking at foods that spike insulin and glucose, this can be obvious. Think candy, chocolate, that full sugar ice cap. These will spike both insulin and glucose levels. But some foods like dairy, protein powders, and even certain meats can cause a huge insulin spike, even if they barely nudge your glucose. So, for example, a glass of low fat milk, low in the glycemic index, but can cause more insulin release than white bread. Whey protein, one of the biggest insulin spikers out there. Even lean beef can cause more insulin release than chicken, despite zero carbs. So, what does this mean for you? If you're only watching carbs or blood sugar and ignoring insulin when you are in an insulin resistant state, you might be missing the foods that are silently pushing your body into fat storage mode. And did you know you can have normal blood sugar and still be insulin resistant? This is a big one. Many women I see and work with have normal glucose, but when we dig a little bit deeper, their insulin is sky high. The body's been overcompensating for years. You often feel fine until you don't. Weight gain creeps in, cravings hit hard, and despite your best efforts, nothing shifts. In fact, studies show that up to 50% of people with normal glucose still have abnormal insulin patterns. And this is even more common in midlife, especially as estrogen starts to drop and belly fat and insulin resistance increases. The bottom line is if you feel like your metabolism has changed, but your blood sugar looks normal, it's worth asking about the insulin glucose challenge test, or at least starting by being more intentional about your meal's insulin demand. Here's the good news: we don't need to obsess over food charts forever, but we can be strategic. Some tips I share with my patients: combine protein with fiber or fat to slow the insulin spike. Don't fear full fat yogurt. It's often better than the fat free version when it comes to insulin. Try eating your protein and veggies before your carbs. This one simple switch has been shown to lower post meal insulin. Be cautious with foods marketed as healthy high protein, like bars or shakes, especially if you're snacking on them solo and if they contain whey protein. In someone who is insulin resistant, intermittent fasting can be helpful, but this requires a conversation with your healthcare provider, as this is not always a good choice for everyone. And strategic supplementation and diet can often help us reverse this insulin resistance and help us develop a more long-term balanced diet. Remember, insulin isn't the enemy, but chronic surges can make weight loss harder, mess with hormones, and set the stage for insulin resistance, especially in perimenopause as our hormones are changing. So if you feel like you're doing all the right things and still not feeling the results, it might be time to think beyond carbs and start looking at insulin. Paying attention to how your meals feel, so energy crashes, cravings, and fullness, can give you clues. And small shifts in food pairing, meal timing, and protein choices can go a long way. Have you ever felt like your body is working against you, even with a consistent clean diet? Send me a message and let me know what your biggest challenge is right now. And I look forward to seeing you on next week's Fix.